Hey guys, welcome to my rerun on Weapon Trial 2 level 70. I rerun Weapon Trial 2 and 3 because of Saffiyah. She's just released and I wanted to use her in some of the endgame content. But I must say this isn't a full exhibition because there are some parts of Saffiyah that you can't use on Weapon Trial 2 because the boss counters ranged attacks and some of Ravia's moves are ranged. So for example, you can notice that I didn't have any reaction skill equipped on Ravia here. Normally I would have Blade Chase, but for this stage in particular, the assisting attack that she does is classified as a range attack. So each time Blade Chase is triggered, the boss will trigger the Voltic static charge on Saffiyah. And you really don't want that to happen, so to make things easier, just unequip this if you're planning to use Saffiyah. You lose a little bit of damage, but she still does a lot of damage. In fact, she competes and in this run later, sometimes even surpasses Ravia in terms of damage. So don't worry, you'll still get a lot of damage out of her. But the other reason why she's pretty good for this run is her anti-espionage order applies physical and magical defense 2 down, which I currently don't have in my party. I don't have a reliable debuffer. So far, I've been relying solely on the disaster bottles as a way to land debuffs. So Saffiyah is a welcome addition to my roster, and at least now I have a much more reliable way of softening up the enemy's defenses. Do take note that the Hangman's Agent that she summons with this skill does have a follow-up attack as well, where he normally applies the Hangman's Mark himself. That attack, or that follow-up attack rather, is also classified as a range attack, so you do have to be careful when you use the Hangman's Agent. Doesn't mean that the Hangman's Agent is useless. You can still use him on a turn where he will self-eliminate himself, and you can also use his repositioning skill. He can swap positions with an ally, and that skill is particularly useful when you have two allies marked with the Voltic charge. You can sort of reposition at least one party member to try to minimize the damage that you take from the cross-shaped attack. So this is actually a pretty useful skill. The settlement of the Hangman is still there, and this is actually pretty useful. You actually get a bit of extra damage in when the boss is in the dying status. And finally, I use a Candlelight to unlock Army Baneblade. This is going to be the nuke that you use. It is pretty energy intensive with this alongside her anti-espionage order. This is why it's very important to have the Flag of Convallaria tactic for this stage so that it's a bit easier on the energy. I also swapped Saffiyah's gear around versus the run of Weapon Trial 3. This run she is more damage oriented rather than support oriented, so I gave her the Ever Burning Blade to land Scorch as well as give her a 20% more bonus to her damage. And I did also give her the Course of Fortune. This actually helps anytime you proc the buff that does an AoE attack. That also triggers her trait, where you get a bit of bonus damage in as well. And the damage from her trait can actually crit. So Saffiyah synergizes very well with Cocoa. Cocoa will give her crit based buffs, and this tremendously improves her damage potential. I'll just quickly go over the other characters. I won't go into as much detail because I've covered this fight before, but one important thing about Cocoa is you want to have to try the pen for the 3 tile knockback. We will be using this to get rid of the red crystal minions that the boss summons. After Cocoa, we have Maita. Maita is my lightning rod. You do actually have a much easier time if you use the Papal Guard, because the Papal Guard can buff a shield on herself, which makes it much easier to tank the lightning attack, but I don't have the Papal Guard built, so Maita is my go-to. To be a good lightning absorber, I gave her the bandage, so this helps her self-sustain, as well as the cooling powder to be immune to the null healing received. So beyond that, she just sometimes uses kick to get rid of any close by red crystals, and she also uses come on everybody for a means to buff and sustain herself and any nearby allies. Gloria is my usual support setup, so her gear are more defensively oriented, as well as the Judgment turret. This turret is actually underrated, I believe, because the Judgment debuff is pretty useful. Not only does it dispel a buff on the boss, but it also increases damage taken by 10%, so that's pretty nice by itself. Beyond that is the usual support setup, but her Longinus Trust is also yet another knockback tool that you can use to get rid of the minions. And finally, we have Ravia. Ravia, there's nothing much to be said. She's there as another damage dealer, and her damage is more or less equal to Saffiyah on this stage. It really depends on whether or not, obviously, her Tropical Cyclone is up, so it's a bit more cooldown dependent. But beyond that, she also has Gash to knock back the red crystals if you need to, and she has a much easier time with self-sustain because she can use another pint to heal the damage that she takes from the Voltic charge attacks. Ravia, I've changed her gear. She now uses Disaster Bottle. So I use one Disaster Bottle for this fight, and I do highly recommend to bring at least one. I would actually recommend to bring two. I do have two, but I am only using one because I wanted to use only one for the fight. I did receive some feedback before that some people don't have two Disaster Bottles, and they've requested me to try and not use two if I can help it. So here we go, one Disaster Bottle, and it's only at level 50. It helps a lot because her Tropical Cyclone is also dependent on the number of debuffs on the boss. If you have up to 5 debuffs, you get up to a 50% bonus to Tropical Cyclone's damage, so that's a big damage increase. For the tactics, finally, I'll just quickly go to the tactics. The tactics is pretty straightforward. I'm using Warhorn and Flag of Convallaria. The first one actually is not needed. Urgent Order. Right after I started the fight, I realized everyone in my team is faster than the boss, so you don't actually need Urgent Order, and you'll never use any other common tactic, so the first tactic isn't important. My damage is a bit lacking. Overall, this is a 9-turn run, but the problem I had is the TP needed. I wanted to use Warhorn earlier, but I didn't have enough TP after using Flag of Convallaria. And you want to prioritize Flag of Convallaria earlier on because it helps with cooldown and energy sustain, which is very, very important for Ravia and Saffiyah on this fight. If you have enough TP, the more often you can use Warhorn, the better. I did use it twice in this stage. The final time is right at the end to burst down the boss to get it done in 9 turns. So that's it, let's jump into the battle. So first off, position is very important because you get hit by the boss at the start where he targets the 2 furthest allies from the boss. So what you want to do is make sure that obviously the right 2 people gets hit. And as you make your way to the boss, you also want to get rid of the red crystals on the way. So this is the way I do it. I use one Disaster Bottle at the start with Ravia as I move up. And I use the Anti-Espionage Order to land Defense 2 down. Now it's very important. Notice that my Hangman's Agent is here and he gets hit by the shock. This is done on purpose because when the shock triggers right here, it actually helps me damage the red crystal so that I can easily bring him down with Gloria's lance on this turn. Round 2, you want to get in position. Maita is the lightning absorber, so you want to move her at that specific tile to get hit by the lightning. Other than that, I get rid of the last remaining crystal and move in to start really damaging the boss with the Flag of Convallaria buff right here. If you have enough TP, this is actually a very good time to use Warhorn, or at least as soon as possible, because the boss is debuffed with a lot of debuffs at this stage, and with Warhorn buff on top of that, you'll be doing a heck of a lot of damage, but unfortunately I don't have enough TP, so this is a slightly longer run. With the Hangman's Agent, you want to use the Hangman's Agent's second turn to attack the boss. You don't have to worry about the Voltage Shock because the Hangman's Agent will remove himself from the field on the second turn anyway, so you might as well get some extra damage in, and he can also help you mark the boss with Hangman's Mark as well. Notice that I also use the sword position. This is very useful because I get to reposition Saffiyah away so that at least no one will die from this lightning shock attack. This also puts me in a position where I can buff Saffiyah with Maita's Come On Everybody. At least she gets a attack and defense 1 buff, which helps a bit because she's taking quite a bit of damage on this fight because she's always up front next to the boss. So notice that with Cocoa's crit based buffs, as you can see, Saffiyah does quite nice damage. Why is that? Well, because of the Ever Burning Blade, she does get a 20% bonus if the boss is inflicted with Scorch, and her trait follow-up attack and her attacks of course can also crit, which does quite a lot of damage overall. If you have the World Turret, then the random trigger of AoE attack from that turret can also crit as well. Anyway, once the boss resummons the minions, it shouldn't be that difficult because 4 of the 5 party members have knockback, as you can see, so just knock back as many red crystals as you can as you make your way back to the boss. The key is that the turn after the red crystals appear, you want to get rid of those closest to Maita because the next attack that the boss does will target Maita. Beyond that, it's okay to leave 1 or 2 alive, you can get rid of them the following turn. So resummon the Hangmans to apply the defense 2 down debuff on the boss, and as always on the first turn your Hangman is up, you want to move him away from the boss, at least 3 tiles away, or he will use the Hangman's Mark on the boss and get the Voltage Shock. This is the second turn, so you get quite a good bit of damage in before the Hangman explode and leave the battlefield. One of the red crystals spawns very closely to Maita, so I get her to kick, but it's very important that she remains the furthest enemy from the boss, or the furthest ally from the boss, so you want to quickly move up Ravia and Gloria here. This is where I finish off the boss. I make my way back up and I will be using Warhorn. Unfortunately, I don't have enough TP yet, so Warhorn is used only in the next round. So round 9 is where I finally get enough TP to use Warhorn, and the boss is solo, so I just ignore everything else and go straight up to the boss, use Warhorn and burst down the boss. I'm quite sure that if I did have better TP overall on the talent tree, I could have used Warhorn earlier, and this would potentially be 7 or 8 rounds in total. Anyway, I'm pretty happy overall with this run. Hope it's helpful and thanks for watching. Nice damage from Saffiyah right there to end the run.